Okay, today we're talking about essay writing. I like to approach the idea of essay writing a little bit differently than most people do. One way we can think about essay writing is as a product. That is, after all, what you're giving me when you write an essay in the class. You're creating a product, you're handing me the product. I'm judging the product. You've all seen the show Shark Tank. They're judging the product or the idea that is being presented. I'm judging your essay. A little bit different. I'm giving an A or B or C or hopefully nothing below that. The other way to think about essay writing is process. What is the process of writing the essay? How do you go about it? And that will lead to the product. Let's look at it kind of backwards in a way, because I want to look at the final thing first, and that is to talk about the product. Okay, here is an essay. Boy, that's all I have to do is draw a circle and hand it in. Well, easy. Well, this is the whole thing. Whatever that thing is you're discussing in the essay. It could be a explanatory essay. It's going over some concept, maybe in a science or something like that. It could be an argumentative essay, which you would certainly have to write in English 101 and then probably later in English 102 in the research methods class. But really I want to look at this whole thing by its parts. So here's one part of that whole thing. Here is another part of that whole thing. And here's a third part of that whole thing. So what happens in an essay? And we're looking at a basic, let's look at a 5 or 6 paragraph essay that you might write in English 101. When we get to English 102, we'll talk about making it a little bit more complicated because it's going to be longer and there's going to be more paragraphs in it. But let's look at it this way. In all essays, we've got to have an introductory paragraph. In the introductory paragraph, think of it this way. You're looking at the whole thing. What is that thing? Could be any number of things. I could give you a subject to write about. I could give you a broad topic and you would have to figure out a way to narrow it down. But in the introductory paragraph, we're looking at the whole thing. In the body paragraphs are pretty self-explanatory, but basically there is the meat of the essay. The body is those 3 or 4 or how many paragraphs it happens to be. Let's say in paragraph 2, after that introductory paragraph, you're talking about this part of the whole thing. In paragraph 3, you're talking about this part of the whole thing. In paragraph 4, you're talking about this part of the whole thing. And then in paragraph 5, you have a conclusion. You have something that wraps up the essay. So we have a whole thing. Let's take, I like to use this as an example. Let's take stress as an example. Now, you can't write an essay about stress. It's too big. But I might give my students a particular aspect of stress to look at. Maybe stress in college students. So this whole thing is stress for college students. Well, what about it? We have to figure out some things to say. Maybe one of the things we talk about is the causes of stress for college students. Maybe one of the things we think about is the effects of stress for college students. That's another part of the whole thing. And a final thing, we talk about the solutions. What do college students need to do to avoid stress? And that's another part of the whole thing here. Now this is a very basic essay, 5 paragraphs, but you can expand it to a longer format. 8 paragraphs, 10 paragraphs. It depends on what whole thing you're talking about. All right, so that's looking at essays as product. Let's look at process too. When I say process, I'm talking about what do you do to start an essay? How do you get to that finished product that you're going to hand the professor to be judged? The first thing you need to do is come up with a topic. Now, a lot of times, the professor will give you a topic. So there it is. You just need to turn that around into a thesis statement. More on thesis statement in a second. Sometimes you'll be given a broader topic. I mentioned a few minutes ago, stress. Well, if I gave you this topic, I do not expect you to turn in an essay about stress. That's too big. That's a whole book. I just want a 750-word essay, let's say. Maybe up to 1,000 words. But certainly you're not going to write about stress. If you narrowed it down some to college students, causes and effects, or even more from there, college students, just the causes. Talk about the causes of stress for college students in a whole essay. That's manageable. Okay, number two thing you have to do in this process is you have to come up with all ideas for all paragraphs. Know what you're going to say in all paragraphs. You can sketch this out in a very informal manner. You can use some kind of mind mapping where you say, this is the whole thing. This is one thing I want to talk about. This is another thing I want to talk about. This is another thing, and so forth. But you've got to come to the essay with a very good idea of what you're going to say. Otherwise, it's just going to be chaos. And finally, in the process, we want to know how each paragraph will look. In other words, there's an introduction. What's going to be in there? What does it need? There's going to be a second paragraph about one aspect of the topic. What's that going to look like? We're going to need a topic sentence for each paragraph. A topic sentence is usually the first sentence in a paragraph that tells what the paragraph is about. What is that one part that you're talking about in that paragraph? Let's go back to the diagram that I had before. Something like that, right? So there are, in this basic essay, 3 parts. Those will be my body paragraphs. Let's go back for a second, though, and talk about the introduction. Introduction, pretty self-explanatory, right? You introduce. What is your topic? One thing that we want to do, though, is we want to grab the attention of the reader. We want some kind of grabber or hook at the beginning, something that is going to interest the reader and make him or her want to read the rest of that essay. Grabber at the beginning could be some kind of dramatic statement, it can be a rhetorical question, it can be a quote from someone that is relevant to that topic. So you talk about the topic, give some introductory material about the topic, and then very important, at the end of that paragraph, we need a thesis. So what is a thesis? A thesis can, in some cases, just be turning around the question into a statement. In some cases, it could be just a statement, it could be an argument, something you want to persuade the reader of. And in the example with stress, it could be just something like this. Okay, there are many causes and effects of stress for college students, but also ways they can deal with it. So this would basically, what is a thesis? It is the sentence that tells me basically what the whole essay is about, or in some cases what I'm trying to argue. So this pretty much does it based on what we saw before with the product, right? This basically encapsulates that whole topic: causes, effects, solutions. Okay, so we're ready to go. We have this introduction ready. What about the length of introductions? Introductions don't generally need to be as long as the body paragraphs, because remember, the body paragraphs are the body. That's where you have the meat of the essay. The introductions are usually a little bit shorter. If you want to put words on it, if we're looking at about 160, 170 words for a body paragraph, we're probably thinking much shorter for an introductory paragraph. Maybe about 100 words. Could be 80 in some cases, could be 120 in some cases. All right, let's look at each of the body paragraphs now. All right, at this point we've established what the topic is going to be. As we get into the body paragraphs, we need to isolate which parts we're talking about. So as we get to paragraph 2, a funny symbol for a paragraph, we need something at the beginning that is going to show what we want to isolate on as far as that whole. Remember again the concept. So here I am in paragraph 2. I'm going to talk about this part of the whole thing. So in the case of our example with stress in college students, it's no more complicated than just saying, okay, college students suffer from stress for a variety of reasons. Reasons would be another word for causes. Very easy. Now, what do I do in that paragraph? Well, I've got to have some details to put in there. I've got to get into those causes. In this case, it looks like it would almost be a list for me. First there's this cause, then there's this cause, then there's another cause, a detailed list. Maybe there would be some examples in there. Maybe I've suffered from some of the causes of stress, or a friend of mine has suffered from the causes of stress. I'm going to put some of that into the paragraph. The other thing that you have to focus on, and sometimes this happens a little bit more in the editing phase of writing the essay than in the first draft, but you want to be thinking about it always, and that is transitioning. Transitioning ideas. Now in the case of our example with stress, it could be as simple as saying, one of those causes is, and then going into details about it. Another of the causes faced by college students as far as stress goes is, and then talk about that some more. Talk about details, talk about examples. And as long as we're thinking common sense, one thing leads to another, the transitioning part of it should not be difficult. Okay, and then as far as the other body paragraphs, we can kind of plow through that quickly because we've got the idea now. This is going to apply to all of the body paragraphs in the essay. So paragraph 3 there is going to be a statement about the effects. What do students feel? What happens in their everyday lives as a result of the stress? And again, we go back to this, the details. Again, it sounds like a list, right? One effect that students have is this. Another effect is this. A final effect is this. So we're thinking about details, we're thinking about examples, and we're thinking about common sense going from one idea to another. Don't overcomplicate it. And so the same thing is going to happen with our last body paragraph. In this case, solutions. I need a statement at the beginning of the paragraph to the effect of, students don't have to worry that much. There are some things that they can do to relieve stress or to deal with stress. And then one of those is, another of those is. Sounds like a list again, right? And put those details in there, make it things that will be memorable for the reader after he or she gets done reading the essay. Okay, and then we have the final paragraph, the conclusion. Now, I don't want to undercomplicate this. Some teachers make the conclusion sound really easy, that all you have to do is go back and restate the thesis and basically restate the things that you said in your body paragraphs. I don't advocate for this. Conclusions are a little bit more than that. If you do that kind of conclusion, it's showing laziness. It's showing that all you have to do is take the math, add it up, and here's the sum. Well, that's one way to think about it, but if I just said, so as we can see, students suffer from stress, the causes of stress, the effects of stress, but that there are solutions, and blah, 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 and then I just wrap it up, that's lazy. It's also not quite what a concluding paragraph wants to do. Think about it. Professional writers, if they write a whole essay and then they put on a conclusion that is just a summary of what I already read, why am I reading the conclusion? The conclusion has to be something that creates some more interest in the subject beyond this plus this plus this equals this. So there's no one way to do a conclusion, but you certainly want to think about maybe the topic overall again, what is significant about the topic. Maybe in some cases the topic impacts the reader's futures in some way, and you can talk about that a little bit. Don't bring up new ideas in the conclusion. We don't want something completely new that should have been covered in one of the body paragraphs, but we do want something there that again shows a little creativity, shows that you as a writer are interpreting all of this information that you've given and are able to convey that to the reader. So I think if you think about this with any topic, you can probably think of at least 3 parts. Number one, at least 3 parts to any topic that you're going to cover. Don't make the topic too big. You're not writing a book. And that if you follow this method, you should be able to write an essay that runs smoothly, that makes sense, that delivers the information that you want it to, or in the case of an argument, that presents reasons for you having the belief that you do and wanting to convince the reader of that. And, you know, again, it's not hard stuff. Don't make it overcomplicated. It's not rocket science. And if you follow those methods, I think you'll be able to write an essay pretty easily.